Order number 33, Part A, that seeks to have the House extend its sitting time or meet at any other time on a sitting day. This is Part B, but the procedural motion is based on Standing Order 30, Part 3A, that the House extend its sitting. It indicates that the House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House today, Thursday, 14th September 2023, be reached before the conclusion of all the business listed in the order paper for the sitting, then the sitting shall stand extended until conclusion of the listed business. That is a procedural motion that the leader of the majority party will be moving this afternoon to have the members push the extended the time allocated for this sitting to an extra time for the business of the day to be concluded if by any chance at the adjournment of the House the business will not have been concluded. The members will also this afternoon resume the debate on the Privatization Bill, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2023, by the leader of the majority party. This bill is at its second reading stage, and if you have been following the proceedings of this special sitting in the morning, is that debate will be this morning, and the members will have more time this afternoon to deliberate on this particular bill. That is a bill that seeks to provide a revised regulatory framework for the privatization of public entities with a view to improving the efficiency and competitiveness of Kenya's productive resources. That privatization bill with the sugar bill by Honorable Member Emmanuel Wangwe are also lined up to be considered at the Committee of the Whole House this afternoon. So as you can see, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Dr. Moses Wetangula, is in the chambers. Allow me to hand you over to this live broadcast of the special sitting brought to you by PBU in partnership with KBC. Good afternoon.
Ewe Mwenyezi Mungu ambaye kwa hekima na wema wako umeteua nyadhifa za viongozi na mabunge kwa ustawi wa jamii na utawala wa haki wa wanadamu. Tukusihi utazame kwa neema nyingi sisi watumishi wako ambao umeridhika kutuita ili tutekeleze shughuli muhimu za jamhuri yetu. Tunakuomba uteremshie baraka zako sisi tuliokutanika hapa, na utujalie tuyatende na kufikiria mambo yote yatakayofikishwa mbele yetu kwa njia ya haki na uaminifu, ili utukufu na sifa zako ziendelezwe, na ili kustawisha amani, ufanisi na heri ya nchi yetu na wale ambao haja zao wamezikabidhi mikononi mwetu. Amen. Sergeant, you may continue ringing the division bell.
Well, the quorum bell is currently on. The House requires a total of 50 members to be seated at the chambers. This is pursuant to the House Standing Order number 34, that at the commencement of the House, we can see the Sergeant at Arms raising that white paper, signaling to the clerk and speaker that the quorum has been achieved So the members will be taking their seats, and the Speaker will call the House to order for the business to officially start this afternoon. I now hand you over to this live broadcast. Good afternoon.
Clerk.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Honorable Wamboka, take the nearest seat. Nearest seat. We might need tutorials, eh? Order, honorable members. I have 2 short communications to make. The first one is appointment of members to the Mediation Committee on the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16 of 2023. Honorable members, you may recall during the morning sitting of today, Thursday, 14th September 2023, the House rejected a motion to consider Senate amendments to the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16 of 2023. In the circumstances, consideration of the said business in the Committee of the Whole as listed in the order paper could not be proceeded with. This is not the first time that the Senate amendments to a bill originating in the National Assembly bills have suffered such a fate. In all previous cases where such scenarios arose, my predecessors applied Standing Order 149 and referred the bill to a mediation committee as contemplated under Article 113 of the Constitution. In this regard, honorable members, I wish to inform the House that pursuant to the Standing Order 149, Senate amendments to the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 16 of 2023, stand referred to a mediation committee. In consultation with the leadership of the majority and minority parties in the House, I hereby appoint the following members to represent the National Assembly in the Mediation Committee to consider the bill. The Honorable Owen Bayer, CBS MP, as co-chair, the Honorable Mother Wangari MP, the Honorable Mboko Milemba MP, the Honorable Abraham Kirwa MP, the Honorable Millie Odhiambo Mabona MP, the Honorable Dr. Makali Mule MP, and the Honorable Dawood Mohammed MP. Honorable members, conscious of the urgency to operationalize the public debt and borrowing framework for monitoring the levels of public debt, I urge the members of this House appointed to the Mediation Committee to honestly liaise with the Senate counterparts once appointed and commence consideration of the contested amendments in order to have the bicameral consideration of the bill concluded with the statutory timelines. I thank you. Members, take your seats before the next communication. The nearest seats. Member for Matthias, what does nearest mean to you? The nearest seats. Order, honorable members. Honorable members, the next short communication is a recognition of a delegation from the County Assembly of Homa Bay. I wish to introduce to you a delegation from the County Assembly of Homa Bay who are seated in the Speaker's row. The delegation comprises members of the County Assembly Committee on Hansard Media, Library and Broadcasting. They are Honorable Vikins Bondo, Chairperson and Head of Delegation. I hope they are up there. The Honorable Yvonne Abonyo, Member. The Honorable Molo Ruben, Member. The Honorable Margaret Oweje, Member. The Honorable Lazarus Ojango, member. The Honorable Milka Oroni, member. The Honorable Daniel Odongo, member. The Honorable Paul Odok, member. And the Honorable Apopo Lentana, member. Honorable members, the delegation is accompanied by 4 staff members from the County Assembly. The delegation is on a benchmarking visit to share experiences and best practices with the Select Committee on Parliamentary Broadcasting and Library and Directorates of Hansard and Audio Services, ICT and Library, Public Communication and Media, and the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit. On my own behalf and that of the National Assembly, I welcome them to Parliament and wish them fruitful engagements with their counterparts. Thank you. Next order.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Honorable members, call on the leader of majority party, Honorable Ichungwa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today, Thursday, 14 September 2023, afternoon sitting. The legal notice number 133 of 2023 relating to the Architects and Quantity Surveyors Amendment Bylaws 2023 and the explanatory memorandum from the Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Next.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Majority Leader? No. No, we don't have. No. Next. Sorry. Next.
Order number 7, questions and statements.
We don't have any. Next.
Order number 8, procedural motion, extension of sitting time.
Majority Leader? That's yours.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to move that pursuant to Standing Order 33A, this House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House today, Thursday, 14 September 2023, be reached before conclusion of all business listed, on the order paper for the sitting shall stand extended until conclusion of the listed business. Honorable Speaker, appreciating that today is a special sitting day, and having seen the way we transacted business in the morning, and I must commend the many members who sat through the morning session, and the fact that we were not able to conclude all the business that was listed for the morning sitting, part of which, like the privatization bill, has extended to this afternoon. The Honorable Nyikal was on the floor and has a balance of 6 minutes remaining. And I'm also certain, Honorable Speaker, there is a lot of interest in the privatization bill and the sugar bill, which is listed for committee of the whole. And Honorable Speaker, there are the other 2 motions for appointment of the DPP and NG-CDF board, and also the consideration of the memorandum by the National Treasury on action plans to revive and commercialize the state-owned sugar companies. All this business, Honorable Speaker, listed, we may not be able to conclude as at the time, the normal sitting hours. And that is why we are seeking to extend time until we are done with this business. If we are able to finish before midnight, well and good. If we have to go up to midnight, Honorable Speaker, I am certain these members have dedicated the day today for that purpose. And I'm sure if you peruse through the order paper, you'll see the many amendments, especially on the sugar bill, and very many members who are keen to prosecute that business. And being that the committee of the whole is where the actual legislation occurs, Honorable Speaker, I want to beg members that we be patient and be available throughout the afternoon until we conclude this business. Let me request the Honorable Jamatia to second this procedural motion for extension of time.
Jamatia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I second the motion. Thank you.
Honourable members, I propose the question, which is that pursuant to Standing Order 33A, This House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House today, Thursday, 14 September 2023, be reached before conclusion of all business listed in the order paper for the sitting shall stand extended until conclusion of the listed business. I'll now put the question. Honorable members, the question is that pursuant to Standing Order 33A, this House orders that should the time appointed for adjournment of the House today, Thursday, 14 September 2023, be reached before conclusion of all business listed in the order paper for the sitting shall stand extended until conclusion of the listed business. As members of that opinion say aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order. Before you call the next order, Majority Leader, can you approach the chair? Where is Minority Leader? He's not there.
Nikal is acting.
Nikal, are you Majority Leader? Minority Leader?
I don't have any. You had 6 minutes. Yes. Well, finishing mine is something I cannot do. So, okay.
Okay, honorable members, will proceed as follows on this privatization bill. I am advised and I concur that we allow the member for Seme to finish his contribution. I'll thereafter give the member for Funyula a few minutes, and thereafter the member for Kahawa. Is it Kahawa? TJ Kajwang is member for Ruaraka, and thereafter we shall consider closure. Is that
Yes. Yes.
okay? Dr. Nikal, can you proceed?
Order number 9, the Privatization Bill, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2023, second reading, resumption of debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the House rose in the morning, I had indicated that I see a lot of good intention in this bill. I indicated that it makes for provision of disputes which are likely to arise when you have a privatization process, particularly where government and the private sector work together. Mr. Speaker, I also said that I see good provisions in the good transition provisions in the bill. But Mr. Speaker, I raised concerns. Mr. Speaker, my concerns were the speed with which this bill is being pushed. In fact, Mr. Speaker, as it was in the morning, it was even supposed to be for a committee of the whole House this afternoon. Mr. Speaker, it is coming together with the sugar bill. It is coming together with the memorandum on the commercialization of the sugar bills. So, Mr. Speaker, one gets the impression that there is a specific purpose for which this bill is being pushed. So as much as this bill is, in its intention is good, the content is good, the speed with which it is going creates the impression that there's something has to be done urgently. What is it that has to be done urgently that we have to push this? Mr. Speaker, the previous bill of 2005 actually failed. The commission therein failed, and as the leader of majority said, it was because of state capture. And I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, that there is nothing to stop us from thinking that even now there are people that are interested in the government. He repeatedly said that the government and the people who captured, but I want to remind this House, one time I said, the decision of government is the president and the people that he listens to. It is, I hope, we are not in a situation where those people are actually pushing a bill so that we quickly privatize without properly organizing ourselves. And Mr. Speaker, the chair of finance created this issue of agency theory, came to the issue of agency theory, where he said that generally, the people who head this, any corporation, the first thing is how do they themselves get served by this? If the member, if the chair for finance is talking like that, Mr. Speaker, you get suspicious. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the intentions, the content looks good, but the speed with which it is being pushed makes me say I do not support this bill at this point in time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Nikal. Honorable members, before the next contributor, order, honorable members, your conversations are too loud. Order, honorable members, Honorable Mawade. I see you in a place I never see you. And in so doing, you are causing a commotion, which is not right. Honorable members, allow me to acknowledge the following schools. In the Speaker's Gallery, we have Koilel Forces Academy, Gilgil, Nakuru. We have Munyu Girls High School, Thika Town, Kiambu. And in the public gallery, we have Ololunga Boys High School, Narok South, Narok. St. Catherine Girls High School, Bomet East, Bomet. Lenana Junior Primary School, Dagoretti South, Nairobi. Kavuvoni Primary School from Booni East, Makueni. On your behalf and on behalf of the whole House, I welcome the schools to Parliament. I was requested by the Honourable Member for Gilgil to welcome a school from her constituency, but I'll allow you to extend the welcome to all the schools on behalf of your colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for indulging me to welcome all the learners in our both galleries as they observe the proceedings of the House, but specifically to welcome one of our greatest extra-county schools in Nakuru County, based in my constituency, the Koilel Forces Academy. Mr. Speaker, this school is one of our largest public boys' school, and it has a population of almost 1,700 students, and we have churned out great men in this country, Mr. Speaker, including your predecessor, the now AG of this country, Honorable Muturi, who is also an alumnus of this school. We also have some members who are sitting, like the member for Sarehe, Honorable Amos Mwago, who are also alumnus of this school. And Mr. Speaker, this school is one of the trendsetters in the county and in the country, and we only hope that, including the other students that are in the gallery, they can pick the very good manners and the very good role models and learn one or two things as they observe the proceedings of the House. Mr. Speaker, on my own behalf, I also, and on your own, on behalf of the House, Mr. Speaker, I welcome them and hope that they can be seated where we are seated in a few years to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the indulgence.
Thank you, Mother Wangari. For the record, Dr. Nyikal, you cast aspersions on the speed at which this bill has been processed, which aspersion will touch even on the chair. And for the record, this bill was published on 6th June this year. We are in mid-September. I don't think that qualifies to be described as a rush. So you should check your records, because you've said the only reason you are against the bill is because of the rush. There's no rush here. Most bills are processed that way. Oundo?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, to give me an opportunity to contribute on the privatization bill, bill number 2022 of 2023. Honorable Speaker, I start by saying the obvious. The business of government is not to do business. The business of government is to create an enable environment so that those who have got competent capacity can do business. By its very nature, government is passionate, is unfriendly to business, so it cannot undertake business. And that's why we must always privatize and get the government out of business and let those people whose motive is profit-making undertake business. Honorable Speaker, this country has got a long checkered history of privatization. We started during Moi's days. There were success stories. There were failed stories. We went through the previous act. Through the previous act, there's only a few semblance of privatization. Of course, the one that remains the most successful is the one for Safaricom, Telecom, and the rest. Honorable Speaker, many of us hold back with nostalgia the days of Kenya Post and the Communication Authority, hold back nostalgia the days of Kenya Power and Lighting Company Limited, we used to call it then, but we have to accept that the economy has changed, we have to get out. Honorable Speaker, privatization, we are privatizing public assets, and therefore it is important that the general public, the representative of the people, must be involved. Honorable Speaker, going through the act as it is, the bill as it is, it has got good intentions, but there are some missing gaps here, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the issue, what do we do with the staff, the beneficiaries, and suppliers of existing corporations that are going to be privatized? The bill is not very clear. Will we just dump them and tell them go and for your own device and go suffer in silence because we are privatizing? That is not very clear, and we'd hope that we would have gotten enough time to craft something that will persuade or save them. Honorable Speaker, curiously, when you go to clause 26(3), it is what it reads: a national government-owned entity is not eligible to participate in a privatization. That particular clause, Honorable Speaker, presents two dilemmas. Number one, yes, privatization means divesting from public to private. So obviously, there's no contemplation of any public entity that can participate. I find that particular statement not very well grounded, but even more telling, the Honorable Speaker, is the issue, what happens to the county government entities? Are they allowed to participate? Because they're not national government-owned entity. That clarity needs to be very clear, otherwise there's going to be abuse. Honorable Speaker, there could be many issues to be dealt with. Honorable Speaker, allow me to delve on one or two things in respect of privatization process. Honorable Speaker, there has always been danger that is the moneyed, that the well-connected, the cartels that exist at the particular moment that end up with most of the chunk of the privatized public entities. We hope the process put here, they will basically use the public offer so that we have as many Kenyans as possible benefit from this process. As I conclude, Honorable Speaker, to can transact other business, we do not wish to cast any aspersion on the House leadership and the rest. But Honorable Speaker, the purpose of the second reading is to members to ventilate, the committee that is in charge of the bill to listen to the members, so that when they are going to make amendments at the committee of the whole House, they have the benefit of having listened to members who have contributed. Honorable Speaker, we conclude now. It's next on the House of the whole committee. Essentially, Honorable Speaker, the debate in the second reading is just in vain. It's window dressing. It's just for PR. We need to look at how we conduct business in this House so that the discussions we are going to have here is not just in vain, Honorable Speaker. We understand the genesis, probably the rush to conclude, as Honorable Dr. Nyikala has said. But we cannot do that clouding the process of debate and legislation making in this House. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support the bill. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Rindikiri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, let me tell Mr. Speaker, happy birthday belated. And Mr. Speaker is not listening. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I wanted to contribute to this motion is I believe the government is on the right decision of bringing this motion. One, Mr. Speaker, because now it's going to bring efficiency and by extension effectiveness in the learning of the affairs of privatization of government entities. Mr. Speaker, this bill brings in qualifications and of the staff and the board that is required for learning the process of privatization. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I am in support of this bill because, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that has been lacking is responsiveness in as far as the discharge of the process of privatization is concerned. Mr. Speaker, there are so many organizations that were intended to be privatized for a long time, and because of lack of the authority and experience and expertise to deal with this process, the process has been delayed for a long time. Mr. Speaker, one of the greatest problems that we are having is accountability. Mr. Speaker, there is the aspect of identifying the values of the assets that need to be disposed of by the government, including the valuation of the state corporations that need to be disposed of. In lieu of having an authority to deal with this process, Mr. Speaker, there was a lack of accountability. Mr. Speaker, in the process, what has happened is that many people have lost faith in the government. I totally agree that there are so many institutions that need to be disposed of, and that the government is not in the process in the business of learning businesses. But however, there are some essential services that the government need to remain in control. When the government wants to dispose of its shares and its control of some state corporations, it's because they are no longer necessary and they need to be getting laid off because there's a lot of duplication in so many corporations. Mr. Speaker, we have a problem in transparency. There has been a very serious problem when it comes to disposal of private enterprises or entities. Mr. Speaker, this bill has come in good time because it has set the stage for what needs to be done when and how. Mr. Speaker, the issue of public participation, the issue of reporting, the issue of entering into agreement has been lacking in the process in the past. So I want to thank the majority leader for bringing up this bill, because for the first time we are now seeing a structured way of public participation, of reporting the deliberations and the entire aspects of the entity that need to be disposed of. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, is the agreement. Mr. Speaker, I find it very interesting that we can sit back and congratulate and start hammering this government. This is the only government that has come out very clearly and exposed the lot that has been there in the previous government. Mr. Speaker, you know telecommunication. Telecommunication was sold at night, behind bars, by unscrupulous people. So this bill is not going to give opportunity for unscrupulous government officers and the state mechanists, the state capture, to sell institutions of government like what they did to telecoms. So I want to support this bill and see the time has come, and this is the openness of our government, Kenya Kwanza government, to do things overboard. So I want to thank Majority Leader for bringing this bill and say this is the best way of dealing with the government business. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, do we call the mover to reply? There is a member who has asked me to give him 2 minutes, called Dr. Mwiti. Dr. Mwiti? He's there. Go ahead. After you, Majority Leader, be ready to reply.
Give me the long one. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to support a report of the Committee on Privatization of the State-Owned Entities. Mr. Speaker, over the years, the Kenyan economy has experienced several challenges that have required the government to interject and also eject funds to stabilize the state-owned enterprises. However, with the constant ejection of funds to various organizations, the state-owned enterprises has experienced a serious problems. However, regardless the injection of the funds, Mr. Speaker, the constant injection of the funds, no substantial benefits that has been realized over the constant years. Mr. Speaker, we have experienced several challenges. However, we have seen funds ejected in organizations such as the Kenya Airways that has constantly been funded, but with very little success. Mr. Speaker, sir, with a struggling economy, privatization of these state-owned companies will efficiently ensure the government raises revenue that can be ejected and also to improve the well-doing state-owned entities. Mr. Speaker, sir, currently the revenue generated by the current organizations that are not performing, it's not very good, and that is why, Mr. Speaker, sir, we require these state-owned organizations to be privatized. However, Mr. Speaker, sir, I urge the authorities established to ensure transparency and openness during the transactions of these entities. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the privatization of the entities, there must need of the government to make sure that issues of jobs are taken care of, especially that various jobs will be lost. Mr. Speaker, sir, the government should have mechanism in selecting entities of privatization. Profit-making organizations, Mr. Speaker, sir, such as the Kenyan and the Post Authority, Mr. Speaker, sir, should be maintained. Mr. Speaker, sir, privatization of these entities that are not performing is long overdue. Therefore, I support, Honorable Speaker, this bill. Thank you.
Mover. Before you move, if you have any feat of generosity, you can give Justice Kemei 1 minute.
Honorable Speaker, let me donate then 2 minutes to Justice Kemei.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the 1 minute I've been given to support this privatization bill. And let me also, in the same vein, thank the majority leader for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to say two things. The time for government to be in business went a long time ago. The economic will of this country and the economic will of the entire global industry is being driven by the private sector. So we need to privatize all public enterprises, Mr. Speaker, so that in any case they've achieved the social purposes for which they were established. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, during my studies, my thesis was on the press and parastatals in Kenya. And the people I quoted, Mr. Speaker, when I was doing that thesis is the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi, who happens to be in the top level of government at the moment. And I also quoted David Ndii, who also happened to be advising the government on issues economic in this country. I believe, Mr. Speaker, the two gentlemen should be able to guide this country on matters privatization. And finally, Mr. Speaker, when we do it, let's make it open so that the people of this country can realize it's a good objective to privatize all public enterprises. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and once more, I appreciate the opportunity you've given me, and I also appreciate the Majority Leader, the Honorable Ichung'wa. Thank you, sir.
Majority Leader.
Honorable Speaker, with your indulgence, I want to donate to Honorable Komingoi 1.5 minutes.
Honorable Komingoi.
Thank you so much, Majority Leader. Mr. Speaker, if you've been following the discussions that have been happening across the country, after 1 year of President William Ruto's government, Kenyans are growing impatient. Action is needed now on the majority of the things that you have promised to streamline. And therefore, this motion is not being hurried. It is in response to the thoughts and the ideas that the Kenyans want to implement and also to clean up government for the purposes of delivering to the people of Kenya and also creating efficiency within our economy, that our economy may be supported by the private sector with new ideas, new efficiencies, and new ways to be able to tackle what has been the problem that was created in the past. We may have had good solutions in the past, but with the development in the economy and the speed with which the economy is growing and the information being passed on within and circulating within the country, we may have come to realize that some of the parastatals, some of the government agencies we have are now ripe for privatization. This bill therefore seeks to remove the challenges and the things that have been impediments, and we shall be saving from the exchequer what we've been using to bail out some of the non-performing or underperforming sectors of our economy controlled by these agencies. I therefore rise to support this motion and urge that we move with speed to be able to implement and see to it that Kenyans reap and our economy is expanded by injecting new blood, new ideas, and new ways of managing these agencies. I support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I now beg to reply. Honorable Speaker, let me first thank all the members who contributed in the morning session and those like Honorable Nyikal who have contributed and the others this afternoon. And Honorable Speaker, you will note that all the members who have contributed to this bill were in support, save for the few reservations on the speed from the Honorable Nyikal. All other members actually had no reservations on this bill, which is indeed commendable and is an indication that they do appreciate the need to have a new legal framework on privatization of our state-owned entities. And just to give the Honorable Nyikal comfort that there is really no rush for doing anything mischievous. The rush is on a rush to deliver and ensure that we realize value at the right time on our state-owned entities that we may need to privatize. And is indeed contradictory because the Honorable Nyikal is among those who have been pushing the government to deliver everything that we promised to deliver within the first 1 year. Now I'm shocked that when we are struggling to ensure that we delivered even on the sugar companies that we want to privatize, he now has a problem that we are moving fast. But we must move fast, the Honorable Nyikal and others, for us to be able to realize value out of these state-owned entities and to be able to deliver. We have a 5-year mandate to deliver to the people of Kenya, just like as members of parliament, we have a 5-year mandate. But 1 year is gone, therefore there must be a rush to be able to ensure that we deliver on everything that we did promise the people of Kenya. And with that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to reply and invite members to join us during Committee of the Whole shortly. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I reply.
Honorable members, I now put the question, which is that the Privatization Bill, National Assembly Bill number 22 of 2023, be now read a second time. As members of that opinion say aye. Aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to provide for a regulatory framework for the privatization of public entities, to establish the privatization authority and for connected purposes. Order number 10, special motion, consideration of a nominee for appointment as the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Honorable members, as I call the Honorable Murugara to move that motion, order. Honorable Kaluma, you are the least I expect to be disorderly. After order number 10, we'll do 11, then we'll skip 12 and dispose of 13, then we come back to 12, 1, Roman 1 and 2. So whoever is the chairperson, Departmental Committee on Finance, be ready. Immediately after 11, we'll jump to 13. Murugara.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. So, Speaker, I beg to move that this House adopts the report of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs on the approval hearing of Mr. Renson Mulele Ingonga, OGW, nominee for approval for appointment as the Director of Public Prosecutions. Honorable Speaker, this report contains the proceedings and deliberations of the committee on the approval hearing for Mr. Renson Mulele Ingonga, a nominee for approval of the position of DPP in the country. The nomination was forwarded to the House by His Excellency the President via the communication dated 17th August 2023. Honorable Speaker, we thereafter conducted the approval hearings, and I wish to inform the House that going by the membership of those present, the members of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, this was more of a peer review, as Mr. Igonga is actually an experienced advocate who has worked in many sectors of the country, including the Lands Office and the Office of the DPP. Present at the nomination, and apart from me and my Vice Chair, Mr. Ekomas Mwengi Mutuse, we had Assistant Lawyer, Honorable Farah Malim. We then had another long-serving advocate of the country, the Honorable Francis Joseph Kajwang, member for Waraka. The others included our Chief Whip, Osoro Sylvanus Onyego. We had Makali John Okwisia. Then we had Moreo Edward Wakili. We had Jane Maina Njeri. We also had Geshohi Kagusha John Philip and Honorable Mogaka Stephen MP, not leaving out another long-serving advocate, Aden Dawood of Wajir East. We also have members who are possibly paralegals by now, and they include the Honorable Mushira Michael Mwangi and Honorable Siyad Amina Udgon. All these ones sat and listened to exactly how the nominee would respond to questions. We evaluated his papers, academic papers, practice papers, and any other documents that were submitted to us, and we confirmed that the nominee was suitable. His response to questions was without doubt that he actually understood what the position of the DPP in the country is and what is expected of him, because each of these members asked him questions so that we would get what response he has and whether he is prepared to take up such an onerous position of the DPP in the country. The country has been without a DPP for a while, and therefore there was some anxiety that we had to allay. And some of the questions touched on what we consider to be fundamental today, because he was asked, we know that the office of the DPP recently terminated high mentioned cases that came up and were terminated for lack of evidence. The question we were posing is, why were such cases being taken to court when actually there wasn't sufficient evidence? And his response was that, in fact, that remains the question. But he has put together a team of advocates in his office to be looking at all cases that are brought to the office to confirm whether they can be sustained in court or these are cases that should not be proceeded with. Another question which was interesting was how he would cushion the office against interference by the executive and any other arm of the government, including parliament. And his response was this, that bearing in mind that the office of the DPP is actually an independent office, he would stay away from any activities that may reveal elements of interference, such that while he knows he has to cooperate with the executive and the legislature and the judiciary ways will be working, he must stay away from any involvement of matters that may actually compromise the office. We then went into a long debate, and we have produced a report, a comprehensive report, which you may all have to look at. You will see that, having considered all the matters, including his background, and his background is that he's a legal practicing advocate, we also went into the process by which he was actually nominated by the Public Service Commission that interviewed him after the selection panel. We also went into a suitability, including academic qualifications. We were satisfied that he does satisfy all these, including his response to questions under Chapter 6 of the Chapter 6 of the Constitution and the Ethics and the Ethics Act as regards civil servants. His response again was satisfactory, and we eventually went into an analysis of what we came up with. And in summary, after listening to him, we formed an opinion that the nominee is actually qualified, him being a Kenyan citizen and does not hold any dual citizenship with any other country. We also confirmed that him being an advocate of the High Court of Kenya with 18 years of experience meets the requirements of Section 157.3 of the Constitution, Article 157.3 of the Constitution. We also confirmed that the nominee demonstrated an aspiration for integrity in the public service and that he meets the requirements of Chapter 6 of the Constitution on leadership and integrity. We further went on to interrogate him and confirmed that, having been declared by all the agencies, including the KRA, the HELB, ESCC, DCI, ORPP, with regard to his tax compliance, higher education loans repayments, ethics and integrity, criminal records, and other political party affiliations, he has met the statutory requirements for appointment to the office as proposed. And finally, the committee invited the public to submit memoranda under oath on nominees' suitability to hold the office as required by Section 6(9) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act. We wish to confirm to this House that nobody, not even a single memorandum, was received in opposition. I also wish to confirm that in fact we got memoranda in support. This is not a requirement when we are doing approval hearings. However, it is worth noting that even the Law Society of Kenya wrote a memorandum in support of his appointment as the DPP. Therefore, having weighed on all the matters that were brought before us and having considered everything that was submitted to us, now we wish to confirm that we have made a report to this House, which I present to the House, that the National Assembly does approve the appointment of Mr. Renson Mulele Ingonga to the position of the Director of Public Prosecutions. This is because he has met all the requirements and we are convinced that he is going to serve the country. It goes without gainsaying that this is a big office. This is going to have a lot of work to do, and especially now that the DPP office has been vacant for quite some time. With those remarks, I do move that this report be adopted and request my able Vice Chairman, Ms. Honorable Ekomas Mwengi Mutuse, to actually second the adoption. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mutuse.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to second the approval of the Director of Public Prosecutions nominee, Mr. Renson Mulele Ingonga. Mr. Speaker, as has been ably articulated by the Chair, Mr. Renson appeared before our committee, and in his appearance, the committee was guided by the Constitution, particularly Article 157 of the Constitution, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Act, and the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act. Mr. Speaker, in terms of all the requirements under the law, we wish to confirm that the nominee was found to have all the qualifications that are required. But even more importantly, Mr. Speaker, for this House, Mr. Ingonga has been a public servant. After completing his university and being admitted in the role of advocates, he was employed in the public service as a registrar and later transferred his services to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Currently, he is the man in charge of the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions in Northeastern Province. And one of the things that we observed as a committee is that this appointment in itself is a morale booster to those public officers, to those professionals who are working in the public sector. Because what has been happening in the past is that when appointments of this nature occur, people are poached from outside the public service, and therefore those who have endeavored their time to work for the public service feel demoralized. And therefore we support this appointment because it is a morale booster for those professionals who have chosen to work for public service. Number two, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Mulele Ngonga, and I've said it, is stationed in Garissa. In many, many instances, public officers have felt that the Northeastern Province is an insecure zone. And for him to have been stationed there for such a long time, working for the citizens of this country, is in itself an act of patriotism. And therefore, for that particular purpose, we wish that this House approves his appointment. Number three, Mr. Speaker, as has been ably stated by the Chair, there is dilemma currently because we do not have a substantive DPP. You know that the DPP is the apex of our criminal justice system. We have seen even petitions in court where prosecutions that have been approved by officers within the office of the DPP are being challenged because some people feel that prosecutions must be approved by the substantive DPP. And therefore, to close that gap, we urge that this House approves Renson Mulele Ingonga to be our next DPP to take over from where Mr. Nuruddin Aj left and to further the war on corruption, just like we have been debating the Privatization Act. And for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I support and I second. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mutuse. Order, Honorable members. Order, Makali. Honorable members, I now propose the question, which is that taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs in its report on the vetting of a nominee for approval as the Director of Public Prosecutions, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 14 September 2023, and pursuant to Article 157(2) of the Constitution and Section 8(1) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of Mr. Renson Mulele Ingonga, OGW, as the Director of Public Prosecutions. Yes, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I know the Honorable Pukose is eager for us to put the question, but just before we do that, Honorable Speaker, let me rise to support the committee's report and commend the committee because they worked very hard to consider the vetting of Mr. Renson Ingonga as the next DPP of our nation, Mulele Ingonga. Honorable Speaker, even as I commend the committee, because whenever public officers go through vetting, Honorable Speaker, and they pass, and their integrity is verified by the members of the committees that vet them, Honorable Speaker, they walk into these public offices with their heads high. But what happens when they're in office, Honorable Speaker, is a story for another day. And I want to encourage Mr. Renson Mulele that he, if approved by the House today, walks into office with his integrity being beyond reproach. And I want to ask him to ensure that his integrity remains that way even for the time he will serve as our DPP. Honorable Speaker, we must also caution the next DPP to be cautious of those others that may want to influence his office to settle scores with other Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, in the last regime, we saw particularly the office of the DCI trying to micromanage the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. And the office of the DPP is such an important office to remain functionally independent of the investigative agencies, independent of all other forces that may exist within the governance structures of our country. I therefore want to encourage Mr. Renson to ensure that that functional independence of the office of the DPP remains so that when people are prosecuted in this country, you are prosecuted purely on the basis of evidence that will be adduced against you in court, not on the whims of officers who are investigating you. Therefore, he must be cautious and scrutinize all files that are brought to him from the investigative agencies to ensure that they have adequate evidence that will sustain cases in court. And Honorable Speaker, in conclusion, let me ask the incoming DPP, if approved by this House this afternoon, to work not to secure convictions, but to work to secure and guarantee justice to the people of Kenya, so that every Kenyan who is prosecuted before our courts, be it for criminal or civil cases, Honorable Speaker, if convicted, they will also feel that indeed justice has been served, because they will know they were guilty and they were convicted out of their guilt. And those who are prosecuted unfairly and they are not guilty, Honorable Speaker, that they will feel that they have justice has been served if they are not prosecuted and convicted. And that is on to ask the incoming DPP, if approved, Mr. Renson Mulele, to work towards securing justice and not convictions, so that, Honorable Speaker, years after he has served in this office, we will be able to proudly refer to his time in office, as we can proudly speak to the performance of DPP Nurdin Haji. Because Nurdin Haji is one of the DPPs who served under one of the most strenuous regimes. DPP Haji served under a regime that wanted to use his office to prosecute political cases, and he was firm. He ensured that justice is served, and he ensured the functional integrity and independence of the office of the DPP. And therefore, Renson has shoes to fit into of DPP Nurdin Haji. And Honorable Speaker, he must also work as Nurdin Haji worked to ensure, as much as we had a rogue DCI then, DCI Amin is not like DCI, former DCI Kinoti. And therefore, I do expect that the DPP, the incoming DPP, will work with the current office bearers at EACC and DCI to ensure that indeed they serve justice to Kenyans that will be prosecuted through the office of the DPP. And with those many remarks, Honorable Speaker, I beg to support and congratulate Mr. Renson Mulele, should he be approved, and do hope and urge members to approve this gentleman who, following the vetting, at least the committee has said in their report that his integrity is beyond reproach. He's a professional advocate of high standing and a man who we want to believe will serve our country with integrity and deliver justice to Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, I beg to support.
Farah Maalim.
Honorable Speaker, I also rise to support this motion. Honorable Speaker, I happen to be a member of the JLAC, and along with my other members of the committee, we went to lengths to establish that Mr. Renson fits the job. And I can tell you his integrity, to the best of our own judgment, is beyond reproach. I rise not only to support him for this position, but I also rise to urge this Parliament, this House. We will, through the JLAC, which I'm a member of, privileged to be a member of, to try and find out what kind of legislative regimes that the DPP would require to make it easier for him to deal with some of the rampant issues we have in this country. Sometimes a prosecutor would want to do a very good job, but he's constrained in many ways by the kind of very lackluster and very permissive manner in which we have approached some of our things, and including in the Constitution right now. And there's need for us to revisit our Constitution. I was in this Parliament and in this country when you are at a time when somebody is accused of a capital punishment, for example, a capital crime. It doesn't matter what you are. You could be a member of Parliament, but you sit in remand until the matter itself is resolved. Nowadays, you can kill as many people as you want, and you say that because everybody has a right to bail, you go and you work your way through the courts and you get your bail. There's need for us, Mr. Speaker, under these circumstances, for us to be able to assist a gentleman like this man we have right now, who is really raring to go to make a difference in this country's prosecutions for the future, to be given the right tools. When they are going to be constrained by the laws and the constitution of the country, and you allow people to do whatever they want to do, and to come out there and influence also things, and the courts, the manner in which they operate in this country, then sometimes with the best person you still do expect the least to come out of. I want us to be ready for this road ahead in which DPP will be fighting corruption, prosecuting people who are guilty of corruption, large-scale corruptions in this country. And those people can stay behind bars in committee regardless of what their status is, until the matter is determined. But if he knows he can come out and still engage in others, then of course the system will have to mess us. Mr. Speaker, I want us to be a country that observes the rule of law, not rule by law. not ruled by law. So we will, as a parliament, in my opinion, humble opinion, undertake also to make legislative provisions in this country that's going to help the prosecutor to deal with cases of corruption, economic crimes, and many other rampant criminal activities that happen in our country, so that these can be reined in the future. I wish the Parliament approves that, the appointment of Mr. Renson Mulele as the next DPP, and I wish him the best in terms of the performance of that job, and wish also this country will have a difference in the manner in which we are going to run our own prosecutorial and other things in the future for the benefit of the wider population of Kenya. Thank you.
I thought we had agreed. Okay, let me give KJ 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I know the interest is high, and so I'll be very brief.
Honorable Bukose. Honorable Bukose, you're out of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity, and I'll take the earliest opportunity to first congratulate the chairman and the Committee of Justice and Legal Affairs for moving this motion, but most importantly, for doing the job that Parliament is mandated to do in the nomination of such a candidate. Mr. Speaker, even those of us who do not know Mr. Renson Mulele Ingonga in person are able to understand the character of an individual who we are proving this afternoon from the report that has been presented here. And for that, I commend the committee and I commend the chair. Mr. Speaker, the work that Mr. Renson is coming into is an office that is of great public interest, especially at a time such as this. He is succeeding an individual who has performed extraordinarily well. Former DPP Nurdin Haji had a very illustrious time in this office, at a very difficult time, Mr. Speaker. At a time when the criminal justice system was being politicized, Mr. Speaker, he stood his ground. He held his head high and worked out of integrity, Mr. Speaker. These are the shoes that Mr. Renson has to fill, Mr. Speaker. Beyond that, Mr. Speaker, because I would not want to take much more time, I'd like to say to Mr. Renson Mulele Ingonga that the criminal space in Kenya and internationally has really evolved, Mr. Speaker. The criminals are becoming more innovative. The criminals are using newer tools. The criminals are using new technology. So even as he goes into the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Renson will have to keep up with the times. They will have to be a bit more innovative in how they prosecute the people. Ultimately, he shall not be judged by the number of people that he jails. He shall be judged by the perception of the justice that his office shall be offering this country. So, Mr. Speaker, we would ask him to look into the new technologies, to see how that can help in the prosecution of cases, Mr. Speaker. We will ask him to be fair, to carry himself with a lot of integrity, but most importantly, for this country, he has an opportunity to move us to the next space in terms of using technology in public prosecution. Mr. Speaker, I'll take the last minute to welcome a school that is in your gallery, a school known as Lenana Junior from Dagoretti South constituency, who happen to be in Parliament today, and I'd like to welcome them to Parliament, and they are able to see the job that the man their parents put in office does in the House. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to welcome the learners from Lenana Junior School in Dagoretti South constituency. Thank you very much.
Johanna, 2 minutes.
Asante Bwana Spika, yangu tu ni kusema ya kwamba hii ofisi yenye Bwana Mulele anaenda kupewa, Bwana Spika, ni ofisi yenye iko na jukumu mingi sana, na kama venye wenzangu wamesema, Bwana Spika, ni ya kwamba makesi nchi hii, shida mingi katika nchi yetu ya Kenya ni makesi ambayo imekaa kotini kwa miaka mingi sana bila kusuluhishwa, bila kumalizwa, aidha kwa sababu DPP hajajipea ile nafasi ya kumaliza. Lakini zaidi, Bwana Spika, kitu yenye mimi mwenyewe ningependa kusihi huyu Mulele ni kwamba akipata hiyo nafasi, Bwana Spika, ahakikishe kwamba kama kesi ya mtu ifanyike kulingana na yale makosa ambayo mtu amefanya. Isikuwe ni ofisi yenye wanasiasa wanaitumia. Isikuwe ni ofisi yenye state pia inaweza kuitumia kuangamiza watu ambao hawana makosa. Bwana Spika, watu wengi Kenya hii saa hii wako na makesi kotini bila sababu, yenye ikifunguliwa, ukiona venye imefunguliwa mashtaka, Bwana Spika, hizo makeses haistahili kuwa kwa hizo makotini, ingekuwa imemalizwa. Kwa hivyo nasihi Bwana Mulele akipata hiyo nafasi ahakikisha kwamba hizo makeses yenye haina umuhimu yoyote aimalize, aikamilishe, ndio nchi yetu iendelee vizuri. Asante Bwana Spika.
Last, before we call the mover, David Ocheng.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I want to support the nomination of Mr. Renson Mulele Igonga as our next DPP, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the country today, you would think that crime pays. Because, Mr. Speaker, we've got a level where anything goes in our criminal justice system, Mr. Speaker. Our criminal justice system has so many leaks, so many cracks. You can never know, even where the facts are very clear of a case, you can never know how a case will go. Even where someone has done something that is so clear to the public that this must be punished, they are never punished, Mr. Speaker. And so I want to ask Mr. Renson Mulele that when confirmed, his job is not only to fight corruption, no. For corruption, you have the EACC. His job is to ensure that the criminal justice system of the country works for everyone equally, works for everyone fairly. Mr. Speaker, in the villages where we come from, Mr. Speaker, the prosecutors and the investigators in the villages, they're always colluding with criminals, and you don't get anything happening down there, Mr. Speaker. A case can be so clear, but tomorrow you are told that the investigator has been given money to mess up the case. If not, that's not the case. The prosecutor has been given money to mess up a case, Mr. Speaker. So that at the end of the day, what gets to the courts, Mr. Speaker, is not what would get a conviction, Mr. Speaker. A prosecutor who cannot get a conviction, Mr. Speaker, will not deter crime. A prosecutor who cannot ensure that people who mess up with our laws are not punished will not deter crime, Mr. Speaker. And so we want to ask Mr. Renson Mulele that just like the person you are to succeed today, ensure that you have related to the law, trust the law only, don't look the other side and say, who is telling me what? The moment you start listening to other quarters, you will not be independent, you will not protect this country from marauding criminals. Mr. Speaker, I support this and wish Mr. Renson Mulele the best in his new appointment. Thank you.
Beatrice Elachi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to congratulate Mr. Mulele, Mr. Speaker, but to also just inform him that now you enter into an institution that you have to be very clear on how you want to take the country. Mr. Speaker, you remember this is an institution that has been used so badly that every person will be used with the EACC and be taken to the DPP, and you find yourself either with a case or no case. And that we are saying it is for him now to streamline and to look at all the prosecutors that have been there. And if possible, to ensure now you start a new slate by sending some of the prosecutors who have been so much in Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, outside Nairobi also. But the other thing, Mr. Speaker, is to look at the different cases, especially cases of young people, where you have the youths who have so many cases that are just lying in courts, and you find that the DPP will never find the prosecutor, Mr. Speaker, will be in court and he's unable to get even witnesses, he's unable to even follow through the case. The case has no any substantive measure to move on, and therefore they levy into all these remands that we have, Mr. Speaker, and you wonder when will their cases end. So I'm hoping as he comes in also, he has to look at cases that can be ended, case to end, and also the cases that don't have any substantive issue to be, and young people also to be released now from these cases, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, There's also another issue that is very interesting, that today you find that there's a case in court, and it is the prosecutor who will be asking now the parents, especially issues of land. And we are hoping now we can end these issues of land, and especially issues of widows who are now wondering what to do next with their cases in court. With those few remarks, I wish him well, and I hope you'll cooperate with other institutions to see that Kenya, within the justice system, is working and working better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, Songoli, if you can be brief.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I will be very brief. I don't know the nominee personally, but the description given by the mover creates an impression of a person who is qualified to get this job. Therefore, I don't oppose. But, Mr. Speaker, just 2 points. The first one is that when the policemen were prosecutors, you could go to court and find that the prosecutor is the first person to be there. Today, and I say this as a practicing advocate, you go to court, the magistrate is waiting for the prosecutor to arrive. That is because most of these people consider themselves so qualified that the magistrate has even to wait for them. I hope Mr. Renson will take note of this and make sure that at least he instills punctuality for the prosecutors, so that advocates and other and litigants do not go to court and wait for them. The second point is that Mr. Renson should realize that as a prosecutor, it is his responsibility to collect the evidence and table the evidence before the court. It is unfair sometimes when I hear many people blaming the court and saying they have released a criminal. The fodder for prosecuting, the fodder for convicting a person must be provided by the prosecutor. If the prosecutor decides to withhold evidence, that person will have to go home, because our criminal justice system depends on nothing other than evidence. So he has his job cut, and I support.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In reply, I wish to thank everyone, all the members who have made their contributions in support of the report and the proposed nomination. I also thank the committee for the work they did, including the secretariat that, Mr. Speaker, you gave to us through the clerk. The work was well done, and I believe this is the reason why we have received the overwhelming support. Mr. Renson must be listening from somewhere. He has heard and received all the accolades. But I must also inform him that most of us here are potential candidates to visit him in different ways, of a cup of tea, but most likely as suspects to be tried for possibly many serious offenses. Please do not listen to what they have said. Just do your work without considering who is who, and ensure that the law is actually followed to the letter, even for some of us. With those remarks, I move to reply.
Thank you, Murugara. Honorable members, I now put the question. Order. Order, Bowen. I now put the question, which is that, taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs in its report on the vetting of a nominee for approval as the Director of Public Prosecutions, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 14th September 2023, and pursuant to Article 157(2) of the Constitution and Section 8(1) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of Mr. Ruben Mulele Ingonga, Renson Mulele Ingonga, OGW, as the Director of Public Prosecutions. As members of that opinion say aye. Aye. If those of the contrary opinion say nay, the ayes have it. Next, Order 11.
Order number 11, special motion, consideration of nominees for appointment to the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Board.
Musa Sirma, you can also prosecute as efficiently as Murugara. We'll make good progress.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that...
Order, Musa Sirma. Musa, indulge me for a minute.
Yes.
Take your seat. Allow me to acknowledge in the public gallery Gasheraka Secondary School from Tharaka Nithi. On behalf of myself and the House, we welcome the students and their teachers to the House of Parliament. Musa Sirma, proceed.
Mr.
Give him the mic.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that taking into consideration the findings of the Select Committee of the National Government Constituency Development Fund and its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as members of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Board laid on the table of this House on the 14th of September 2023 and pursuant to Section 15(1)(e) of the National Government Constituency Development Fund Act 2015 and Section 8(1) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of the following persons as members of the National Constituency Development Fund. 1. Honorable Olago Oluoch, CBS. Honorable Janet Teya. Senator Matsitsa Naomi Shionga. Mr. Speaker, as the members were sent to you by the Minister for Treasury, you forwarded the same names and committed the Committee of National Government Constituency Development Fund to do the vetting. Mr. Speaker, we've gone through all the required provisions in terms of advertising on anybody who had issues with the three names. And Mr. Speaker, when the time that was on the 5th, which the time which lapsed for or ended for provision of the petitions, we had no memorandum against the three. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we went ahead and vetted the three members. And Mr. Speaker, having known, and by all members, the Honorable Olago Oluoch, who is a lawyer and a three-term member of the National Assembly, with all his credentials, Mr. Speaker, the committee agreed that he was fit, and also providing the necessary documentation of the ESCC and DCI and all other required documents. Mr. Speaker, we came to the conclusion to approve. Honorable Janet Marania Teya has served this House for 2 terms, one as a nominated women representative of Kajiado, and again nominated to this House. Mr. Speaker, Teya has been in the community circles and has worked for the community in various areas, and she has all the knowledge and expertise to be able to deal with the work of NG-CDF. Mr. Speaker, we saw her qualified to take up the position. The third one, Mr. Speaker, is Senator Matsitsa Naomi Shionga, who was a nominated senator in Parliament. Mr. Speaker, Naomi has a master's degree in health informatics and is qualified and is able to be a member of the board, having known or worked in the grassroots in terms of the health sector and also in many developmental community work, the candidate, Honorable Masisa Naomi, was approved by the members of the committee. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move, and I ask Honorable Kasim Tandaza to second.
Mheshimiwa Tandaza. Give him the mic.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The NG-CDF board, Honorable Speaker, is such an important board for all of us here in this house. It is so important given that our existence out there definitely depends on the board in terms of facilitating our funds to our constituencies and to our people. It is over a year that this board has not been properly constituted since the other 3 members whose terms had lapsed and one who resigned. We were left with only the civil servants seconded from the different line ministries. It is high time that we approve these 3 members who are qualified for the job so that the NG-CDF board can be properly constituted. We all know that the NG-CDF is facing a myriad of problems, especially in the legal battles before it. We also know that we have quite a number of legislative proposals that will be before the House, some undergoing public participation, just to align it to the 2010 Constitution and other acts of Parliament. It is through this board that we hope we shall be able to achieve all this so that we can have NG-CDF functioning for eternity. For those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support.
You second?
I second. I second.
Thank you, Honorable Tandaza. Honorable members, I now propose the question, which is that taking into consideration the findings of the Select Committee on the National Government Constituencies Development Fund in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as members of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Board, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 14 September 2023, and pursuant to Section 15(1)(e) of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Act 2015 and Section 8(1) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of the following persons as members of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Board. 1. Honorable Olago Alwoch, CBS. 2. Honorable Janet Teyia. And 3. Ms. Masisa Naomi Shionga. You put the question? There having been no debate, Honorable Pukose, there's nothing for the mover to reply. So we can only put the question. Honorable members, I'll put the question to order number 11, which is that, taking into consideration the findings of the Select Committee on the National Government Constituencies Development Fund, in its report on the vetting of nominees for appointment as members of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Board, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 14 September 2023, and pursuant to Section 15(1)(e) of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Act 2015 and Section 8(1) of the Public Appointments Parliamentary Approval Act 2011, this House approves the appointment of the following persons as members of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund Board. 1. Honorable Olago Alwoch, CBS. 2. Honorable Janet Teyia. And 3. Ms. Masisa Naomi Shionga. As members of that opinion say aye. Will those of the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, as I had directed earlier, we'll skip order number 12 and go to order number 13. We'll come back to order number 12 thereafter.
Order number 13, motion, consideration of the memorandum by the National Treasury and Economic Planning on action plans to revive and commercialize state-owned sugar companies.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this House adopts the report of the Joint Committee of Finance and National Planning and that of Agriculture and Livestock on Treasury Memorandum on action plans to revive and commercialize state-owned sugar companies. Mr. Speaker, the leader of the majority party, the Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, tabled the Treasury Memorandum on action plans to revive and commercialize state-owned sugar companies on the 22nd of August 2023. The Speaker of the National Assembly directed that this memorandum be referred to the departmental committees on finance and national planning and that of agriculture and livestock for consideration and reporting back to the House within 2 weeks. Honorable Speaker, the National Assembly is requested to consider and approve, as per the Treasury memo, 1, rate of loans owed to the public sugar companies to GOK and Kenya Sugar Board or Commodity Fund amounting to Kenya shilling 65,778,448,646 as at 30th of June 2023 and any other accrued interest as at the date of approval. And 2, to write off taxes, penalties, and interests as approved by Parliament amounting to Kenya shillings 50,144,801,608 as at 30th June 2023, and any additional interest and penalties that would have accrued since then. And 3, the vacation of the privatization model approved by Parliament in 2015. And lastly, Honorable Speaker, that the leasing model of 5 public sugar companies and these public sugar mills, and these are Zoia Sugar Company, Chemlil Sugar Company, Miwani Sugar Company, that is in receivership, Mohoroni Sugar Company in receivership, and South Nyanza Sugar Company. Honorable Speaker, the sugar industry plays a very significant role in supporting the economy and livelihoods of more than 8 million Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, it is sad to note that Kenya has been a net importer of sugar since the mid-1980s, and the gap between production and demand has been widening over time. Kenya's annual consumption in 2002 stood at 1.1 million metric tons against a production of only 790 million metric tons, leading to an importation of 320 million metric tons worth Kenya shillings 28 billion. Annual production importers has shown an annex in the report that we tabled in the morning. Mr. Speaker, the objective of the memoranda is to create a competitive sugar sector with the ability to withstand the withdrawal of COMESA safeguards, with a focus on the modernization of sugar milling plants, which will improve production and operation efficiency, enhance cane development in both nuclear estate and smallholder farms, in addition to improving cane sucrose content to between 13 and 14%. Honorable Speaker, the memoranda proposes a leasing model that will bring on board private capital, expertise, and modernization of sugar mills for efficient commercial operations, leasing the nuclear estates and factory land to private investors. Honorable Speaker, when considering the memoranda, the Joint Committee held meetings with stakeholders, most of whom will be affected by the proposals in the memoranda. The stakeholders, including members of county assemblies, members of parliament, sugarcane farmers, outgoing institutions, management of state-owned sugar companies, the National Treasury, Kenya Revenue Authority, among others. The meetings were held in Kisumu County last week from Tuesday, the 5th of September to 7th of September 2023. Honorable Speaker, at this juncture, I would like to extend a sincere gratitude to yourself because you convened a very successful sugar conference that weekend, in whose we have also borrowed heavily from the recommendations that you made from that sector. We also applaud the members of parliament from the sugar growing areas that came in person and submitted both their oral and written memoranda about the revival of this sector. This shows the villa in which the members of parliament across this sugar belt region hold this sector and are willing to do their best to protect the interests of sugarcane farmers. Most importantly, we saw a bipartisan approach where members of parliament across the political divide had one united stand that they want to revitalize the sugar sector. They want the sugar mills to go back to business. They want sugarcane farming to become a profitable business again across the sugar belt areas, Honorable Speaker. During the stakeholders' engagement, the Joint Committee noted the following, that all the public milling companies were on their knees and the situation has been made worse by the lack of sugarcane in the country, which has led to temporary closure of the companies. The factories, plants, and machinery has not undergone annual maintenance for years due to lack of finances. And this has, of course, greatly impacted the efficiency of these factories. Public mills are also choking with huge debts. Numerous court cases have halted the operations of these mills. However, after the visit of His Excellency the President, some progress has been made. But we still have ongoing court cases for Miwani Sugar Company, which we are hoping that those in court will still follow the quote-unquote mambo ni matatu and ensure that cases are withdrawn and Miwani Sugar Company gets to be listed and operationalized. Honorable Speaker, the committee observed that while management of state-owned sugar companies supported zoning, farmers were opposed to it because they felt that the practice will tie them to sugar companies that may fail to pay them after the cane has been delivered, and again affecting the competitiveness and the pricing of their sugar cane. The farmers, however, supported the introduction of 5 catchment areas, which will be Rift Valley, that will comprise Kericho, Nandi, and Western Gishu counties, Upper Western region that will comprise Bungoma and Trans Nzoia counties, Lower Western region that will comprise Busia, Kakamega, Siaya, and Vihiga counties, Southern region that will include Homa Bay, Kisumu, Migori, and Narok counties, and the coastal region that will have Kwale, Lamu, and Tana River counties. Honorable Speaker, all the stakeholders supported the proposal to write off death and taxes owed to GOK, Sugar Kenya Sugar Board, Commodity Fund, and KRA by the sugar companies. They added that the sources of the funds for payment of farmers' arrears and salary arrears of the staff that have been working in these sugar mills had not been captured in the leasing model and in this memorandum by National Treasury. Honorable Speaker, we were treated to as employees that came crying that their schools, their students have been sent home for school fees because they had gone without pay, some even for 52 months. Mr. Speaker, the stakeholders noted that it was imperative for public participation to be done during the leasing process. This experience in the industry will enrich the process and make members of the public more receptive to the process. The farmers were categorical that the lessee should not be a company that has already invested in the sugar industry in Kenya to encourage competition in the authority. Honorable Speaker, the proposal to merge Chemilil Sugar Company and Muhoroni Sugar Company were vehemently opposed by the stakeholders because it will impact negatively on competition of the industry and also would lead to job losses. They averred that besides the nuclear estates, the two companies had contracted farmers who supplied them with sugarcane, and their acreage was therefore more than what they provided in the memorandum. Honorable Speaker, they disagreed with National Treasury's thinking that a sugar mill needed to have 29,800 hectares of nuclear estate land to be operational. They noted that although Chemilil and Muhoroni sugar companies have less actually than that, for many years in the 90s, they were actually profitable. And therefore, the requirement that this be merged were vehemently rejected. The committees were implored by the stakeholders to expedite the consideration of the sugar bill, something that I'm very happy that, Honorable Speaker, you have considered and the House Business Committee has considered as an important business later this afternoon. Honorable Speaker, the Joint Committee observed that the memoranda is silent. I have covered that. Honorable Speaker, cane poaching also became a great interest in this particular inquiry, because companies were, private sugar mills especially, were coming from far and wide, poaching, doing cane poaching, and disregarding the existing contracts that those farmers would have with other companies. For instance, Honorable Speaker, Sony Sugar Company highlighted that they had lost 4 billion shillings to cane poaching. This practice is perpetuated by unscrupulous millers, has led to harvesting of young cane, temporary closure of sugar mills, and subsequent sugar shortage in the country. It has also impacted greatly negatively on cane development by millers because of the fear of losing the investment. There is no funding, Honorable Speaker, to the Kenya Sugar Research Foundation. Honorable Speaker, the MD of Kenya Sugar Research Foundation demonstrated to us that they have researched and they have cane varieties for all the areas that can grow sugar. In addition, they have a cane variety that can mature in less than 12 months. But the sugar mills around these areas keep giving these cane farmers cane seeds that take 24 months, 36 months, and there is no way any subsistence sugarcane farmer would wait for a whole 24 months for the cane to mature before they get the return on the investment. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, one of the recommendations you're making is more budgetary allocation to Kenya Sugar Research Foundation so that they can continue to develop cane that has less maturity period and for the uptake of this by the farmers. All the 5 public sugar mills, Honorable Speaker, are faced with these financial difficulties, and of course, in the absence of a good legislative, regulatory environment, their operations have greatly been hindered. Honorable Speaker, the joint committees therefore recommends the following: that this House grants approval for the leasing model for the 5 state-owned sugar companies within the provisions of the Public-Private Partnership Act number 14 of 2021. The provisions of the leasing model should include and must include the following: 1, that the lease shall be for a period not exceeding 30 years, pursuant to Section 21(2) of the Public-Private Partnerships Act number 14 of 2021 for the sugar mills and the nucleus estates presently owned by the state-owned sugar companies, whereby the nucleus land shall only be used for cane development and cannot be used for collateral by the lessees. Honorable Speaker, the farmers told us expressly that that land is their ancestral land, and there was no way they will give up their ancestral land to anybody. And therefore, at the end of the lease, that ancestral land has to revert back to the communities because it is their birthright, it is their ancestral land. At the expiry of the lease period, the land will revert to the original owners. And then the National Treasury will cost the assessment of the lease and shall be done after every 5 years to ensure that the lessees have adhered to the terms of the lease and so that it can be removed, so that it can be renewed. Honorable Speaker, they were concerned that the lessor could, or the lessee could lease the farm and not agree to this particular propositions. And considering the large period of lease for 30 years, they recommended that there be a review of this lease agreement for every 5 years. The lessee, Honorable Speaker, shall modernize the sugar mills by installing new machines and technologies to revive the companies, improve the financial well-being of the farmers, create employment, both directly and indirectly, and increase government revenue. The lessees shall specify the CSR activities that they will set up in the local community as a requirement for the award of the lessee. They remembered with nostalgia how those sugar mills provided health services, schools around the areas, academies, some even had golf courses, had very well-maintained roads, and they want to know whether the lessee will carry out those CSR activities so that they can have what they used to have, and even much better. The fate of the workers, Honorable Speaker, currently working in the mills was also a great point of consideration. And the lessee So the workers, the lessee, the lease must contain a clause that will facilitate the fate of the current workers in these sugar factories. The leasing process shall be clearly outlined and shall include stakeholders' engagement. That this exercise should be carried out with public participation and making sure that there is involvement of the farmers. Honorable Speaker, this joint committee also recommends that this House vacates the privatization model that was approved by the National Assembly in 2015. The model that was approved in National Assembly in 2015 as proposed by then Cabinet Secretary or Minister for Finance, Honorable now be vacated so that we adopt this new model. That this House, Honorable Speaker, approves the Cabinet's decision to write off the total taxes amounting to 16 billion shillings, 378,998,407, comprising 9,926,209,019 shillings of principal tax and 231,917,718 as interest, and Kenya shillings 6,221,571,670 as penalties owed by the 5 state-owned sugar companies. Honorable Speaker, that this House approves the Cabinet's decision to write off loans that are owed to GOK to the sugar companies through the Kenya Sugar Board and the Commodities Fund, amounting to a total of 65 billion shillings, 778,448,646. That, Honorable Speaker, within 90 days of this House's resolution to adopt this report, the National Treasury shall cause payment of Kenya shillings 1,683,397,053 shillings and 69 cents as arrears that is owed to farmers for those 5 state-owned companies. That number 6, Honorable Speaker, that within 90 days of the House resolution to adopt this report, the National Treasury shall cause payment of Kenya shillings 5,234,464 and 33 5,234,465,033 shillings as salary arrears and other emoluments for the 5 state-owned sugar companies. Number 7, Honorable Speaker, that the House rejects the proposed merger of Chemelil Sugar Company and Mohoroni Sugar Company, and that of the two and that those 2 companies should be leased separately. Honorable Speaker, that the House approves the introduction of the 5 cane catchment areas I had said earlier. But most importantly, where cane supply contracts are signed, that this House approves those 5 catchment areas apart from where cane supply contracts have been signed between the farmer and the miller. The question here is we want to make sure that cane is available to the millers, but at the same time protect also those millers that would have cane contracts with the farmers, so that we do not have a situation whereby we are forcing farmers to sell their cane where they do not need to sell them, Honorable Speaker. And that the cane supply contract should include the timelines, the cane pricing formula that is developed, and that cane pricing formula would be developed by the Sugar Research and Training Institute and approved by the Sugar Pricing Committee. Honorable Speaker, the farmers were worried that they were not getting the correct price for their sugar, what in other areas we are calling guaranteed minimum price. And therefore, that leasing contract, that cane development contract would include the price of cane. And the price of cane will be proposed by the Sugar Research Training Institute, because they are the institute that have done enough research to know how much it costs to develop the cane, Honorable Speaker. And that the National Treasury and the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock livestock development should conduct an audit of the debt portfolio of the outgrower companies, including Mumias Grower Companies Limited, Zoya Outgrowers Company Limited, and establish whether they are solvent and can be utilized for cane development, and within 60 days to present a report to this House. And Honorable Speaker, I would like to congratulate Honorable Salasia. He was very particular in support of Mumias Outgrowers Association and articulating the plight of his farmers. That within 90 days, Honorable Speaker, the adoption of this report, that the National Treasury shall cause allocation of Kenya shillings 600 million to the Sugar Research Institute for multiplication and popularization of 27 sugarcane varieties that are already generated through research. Number 11, Honorable Speaker, that within 60 days of the adoption of this report, the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock that will put in place regulations to protect the recommendation of this report. The regulations shall be submitted to the National Assembly within 60 days of the adoption of this report for consideration as provided in the statutory. And lastly, Honorable Speaker, that within 60 days of the adoption of this report, the Auditor General shall conduct a forensic audit of further debts of 26,717,029,612 cents to ascertain the authenticity of these debts, other debts that are in these sugar companies, and table a report to this National Assembly to facilitate budget allocation and authentication of this debt. And with that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to move and ask my co-chairperson, Departmental Committee of Agriculture and Livestock Development, Dr. Mutunga, to second. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Dr. Mutunga.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand to second that the House adopts a report, Honorable Speaker, on the action plans to revive and commercialize the state-owned sugar companies. Honorable Speaker, these companies, as alluded in the moving notes, have a lot of problems, and these problems need to be sorted out. The greatest problem being the levels of indebtedness. They have a lot of debts. And the other issue is the aging nature of the processors. The machines themselves are very old, they're inefficient as such, and therefore they are costly, and they're using very ancient technology. Honorable Speaker, the governance structures of these factories or these companies is wanting. And the policies that they use and the processes that they are using also need revisiting. Therefore, the need for us to call for revitalization of some of those factories. Honorable Speaker, my co-chair has alluded to the amount of money required in order to bail out some of these, the five companies. But Honorable Speaker, bailing out the companies is not enough to revive the sector. In order to revive the sector itself, Honorable Speaker, we need to revisit the major productivity enhancing options that we need to take as a country in order to revitalize the cane industry. In order to do that, we need to embark on research innovations and research technologies and management practices that need to be developed to accompany the varieties that are produced from the research centers. Honorable Speaker, we have a cane research institute which has been very poorly funded, and despite that, Honorable Speaker, they clearly indicated to us that they have come up with 27 varieties of sugarcane plants. And these varieties have not yet been tried out on the farms. The varieties grown on the farm right now take between 18 and 24 months to mature. And they do not have very high sucrose content. And they clearly told us that the sucrose content of these varieties is extremely high. So the combination of sucrose content and fast-growing varieties is what we need to improve on this particular sector. Honorable Speaker, we need to support the Research Institute to be able to do this work, to move out the varieties that they have. The other issue that needs to be taken care of, Honorable Speaker, is the issue of soil health. Where cane is growing needs to be studied thoroughly, and therefore we need to also do what is called varietal specificity or varietal matching with the soils of the different areas. Indeed, some of these varieties that are produced, especially for the coastal region, have been realized to be able to mature within 6 to 9 months. If we can have a cane variety that is maturing in 6 months, it therefore means that, especially under enhanced production where we shall use irrigation, it is possible for us to produce 2 crops in a year. If we can produce 2 crops in a year, and we are doing 692, sometimes 1,000 metric tons of sugar, we shall be able to exceed our national demand for sugar, which is 1.1 million metric tons, and even be able to export some sugar. The other issue, Honorable Speaker, that needs to be looked into is provision of sufficient water. it is time we considered sugarcane under irrigation. And this is happening in the coastal region where we have sugar production, and the investors in the coastal region have clearly shown the possibility of harnessing water, especially the surface runoff, and stream water to be able to dam it and use it for downstream irrigation. And this can help a great deal in production of the sugarcane. Honourable Speaker, we met many stakeholders, and I do not need to go to the details of what we agreed with the stakeholders, but I would like to highlight about 2 or 3 points that came out of the stakeholder consultation. One of them is the fact that the withdrawal of the sugar development levy was a major issue or a major drawback that has affected the cane production industry. The cane industry needs, the cane development needs to be supported. Not only cane development, research needs to be supported. The actual application of these varieties, multiplication of these varieties across the country needs to be supported, and also the distribution of the same needs to be supported. So technologies must move from the research station, and they must be applied on the farm for us to have the varieties that we need. And since we have so many of them, therefore it is important for us to put in money. So reinstatement of the levy is important. And I wish to report to the House that we have a bill that's upcoming, and possibly this evening, that is going to the Committee of the Whole House, and that bill specifically reintroduces the levy that will be used to enhance the sugar industry. The other issue that came out, Honourable Speaker, is that outgrower institutions are key in the production of the cane. Several outgrower institutions did consult us, and they came out very strongly in terms of the role that they play to bring the farmers together, to pass the knowledge and technologies to them, and to enhance production and productivity. And therefore, we needed to have that consideration, especially when it comes to supporting the outgrower institutions. I pose to basically analyze how the outgrower institutions cannot survive in this country. Honourable Speaker, the only source of income for outgrower institutions is membership fee. Membership fee for a farmer is normally very little, like 100 shillings per farmer. Despite the number of farmers you enlist, Honourable Speaker, it is not possible for these institutions to support themselves by mere use of the membership fee, and therefore it is important for us to consider supporting the outgrower institutions so that they can support the production and productivity that is needed in order to support this particular sector. Honourable Speaker, the issue of zoning came up, supported by a few and opposed by others. As the joint committee, we want to make a decision on this particular issue. And we stuck to the cane supply contract, and we decided that the penalties must be made punitive for those who enter into cane supply contract. Because the cane supply contract will allow millers to engage farmers at very close range. They will allow the millers to look for money, especially for money set aside, especially in the cane, the sugar development levy that is set aside for cane development. They can access that money or guarantee farmers to access that money, and this money can be used to improve on the cane development, which will improve the production and productivity. In that particular arrangement, the miller who supports the farmers or the cane growers to improve on the production and productivity should be allowed to harvest their cane. And, Honourable Speaker, with those few remarks, I beg to second.
Thank you, Honourable Mutunga. Honourable members, I now propose the question, which is that this House adopts the joint report of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning and the Departmental Committee on Agriculture and Livestock on its consideration of the memorandum by the National Treasury and Economic Planning on action plans to revive and commercialize state-owned sugar companies, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 14 September 2023. Justice Kemei.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity you've given me so that I can also add my voice on the memorandum from the Treasury. From the onset, Mr. Speaker, I must mention that I've been in the sugar industry for a fairly long time. And when we made visits to the sugar factories in Western Kenya and parts of Coast Province, Mr. Speaker, the mills that we used to consider as economic hubs are a pale shadow of themselves, Mr. Speaker. From the onset, Mr. Speaker, I must mention that cane growing is one of the richest economic activities in the whole world. When you consider all crops, Mr. Speaker, it is macadamia which leads in terms of earnings, followed by avocado, and the third one is sugarcane. However, Mr. Speaker, these riches have not gone to our farmers in this country, basically because of a number of reasons. Reason number one, Mr. Speaker, is that the processing facilities in the mills that we have in this country has not been good. The efficiency levels are very low, and therefore the conversion ratio of cane to sugar has been extremely low. While countries, Mr. Speaker, like Brazil, convert 9 tons of cane to 1 ton of sugar, in this country we are doing as much as 20 tons of cane for 1 ton of sugar. That, Mr. Speaker, cannot be an economic activity. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the efficiency in the field is equally very poor. The cane that we grow ends up in the mills after 3 or 4, 5 days. The sucrose content in that cane has gone down. And Mr. Speaker, we do not expect the mills to be able to process the cane and lead to better recoveries. Mr. Speaker, when we look at the sugar industry in this country, we are one of the highest cost producers in the whole world. Sugar is produced at about $700 per metric ton in Kenya, while in countries like Brazil, the cost of production is in the range of $300 per metric ton. When you come to the Comesa region, Mr. Speaker, there are countries like Zambia, countries like Swaziland, which produce sugar at about $400 per metric ton. We must strive, Mr. Speaker, to be an efficient producer of sugar as a nation. Mr. Speaker, we consume 1 million metric tons of sugar, and what we produce is about 700,000 metric tons. Mr. Speaker, that deficit of 300 metric tons has been making this country to spend its meager dollar resources in terms of importation of sugar. Mr. Speaker, we spoke to the farmers, and we must be true to them. And they had said, Mr. Speaker, they would follow us until when we are discussing this issue in Parliament. One of the most emotive issues, Mr. Speaker, has been the land issue. And they said, Mr. Speaker, when the lease model is implemented by the government, land that initially belonged to our people must revert back to the original owners. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the committee, the joint committee, has given due regard to this, so that at the end of the expiry period of 20 years or so, Mr. Speaker, the land should be able to revert back to the original owners. Mr. Speaker, we want as a country to be able to give the private sector the ability to run the cane industry such that it is meaningful to our people. But as we do that, Mr. Speaker, we need to prepare our farmers so that at the end of the day, they should be able to carry on as actual owners of the mills that we have in this country. Mr. Speaker, they gave us the model of Kenya Tea Development as agency, which they say over time, Mr. Speaker, they should be able to man the mills themselves. And finally, Mr. Speaker, we've been sitting on knowledge from our research institution, the Kenya Research Institute. That institute has developed varieties with a very high sucrose content, with a very high pollen cane, Mr. Speaker, that we should be able to get our farmers to grow them. And finally, Mr. Speaker, in terms of sharing the proceeds between the farm and the mills, the formula that is provided by Kenya Research Institute is the best way in which we'll make our farmers adopt better sucrose content cane and earn a better living out of them. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support the memorandum. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable members, I want to give you direction as follows. I would want to guide the House that we go to the Committee of the Whole at order number 12 by 5:30. So I want us to agree on limiting contribution time. Can we do 3 minutes? 3 minutes. That, of course, I'll give, if the minority and majority leaders want to speak, I'll give them 5. Pardon? 15? I won't give you 15. The majority and minority leaders, if they wish to speak, I'll give them 5. The rest of the members, you can compress your issues into 3 minutes each, so that we can have as many as we can. By 5:20, I'll call the mover to reply. Is that agreed? Carolo Mondi?
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable members, if you make your points, my professor used to tell me, if you can't make your point in the first 2 minutes, you are unlikely to make any point in 1 hour.
I agree absolutely, Honorable Speaker. I rise to support the report, but I would like to draw the attention of the Chair and the other members, as well as the House, about Miwani land, the 10,000 acres of Miwani land, Miwani sugar. I think there's been a lot of problems over that land. Somebody claims to have bought it in an auction on December 27th, 2007, just the eve of the elections of that year, claims to have bought it in an auction that never took place. He has never produced any evidence that he paid for the land. His claims over that land were dismissed by the High Court of Kenya and the Court of Appeal before the Supreme Court was established, reverting that land to the community of Miwani. I would like to propose that this report includes a paragraph on that land inviting the Auditor General to do a forensic report, audit of the ownership of that land, and submit to this House a report on the status of ownership of that land, so that we can protect the community around that land. I'm very sure that Honorable Koyo and Honorable Nabina Bwera are very well versed, and Mr. Speaker, I'm sure they could add something to this. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable DK.
Thank you very
much. Example of Carolo Mondi will have a very good contribution.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to support the action plan that has been tabled by the Joint Committee of Agriculture, Finance and National Planning. It is important that the sugar sector has been having a lot of problems. And for the better part of our Agriculture Committee, we have taken a lot of time to look at the problem that is affecting the sugar sector. And one of the problems that is affecting the sugar sector is the debt that is currently affecting the public companies. One of it is Mumias, we have Nzoia, we have Miwani, that is only the land that is remaining, we have Moroni, we have Chemelil. They have a lot of problems. And this action plan will assist the government to fix the problem once and for all. When we were doing the stakeholder engagement recently in Kisumu, the important fact that came out is that sugarcane farmers don't want their companies to be privatized, but they are of the view that they can be leased to strategic partners in a duration that is not 99 years. They actually said that they can only be leased for about 20 years. And in that lease, it should come out very clearly that one of it is that the strategic partner should use the company and the nucleus farms for sugarcane production. At no time should they start growing beans, potatoes in those farms. It was also clear that the strategic partner should come with new machines. We have seen cases whereby there is maintenance and over 700 million is used for that maintenance. But they say, for us, for the sugar companies to be able to be productive, let the strategic partner come with new machines. They also of the view that the issue of zoning should not be brought into focus because it undermines productivity and it undermines competition. Thank you very much.
Minority Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to support this report for the simple reason that it is high time we rescued the sugar sector. This has been a problem that our farmers have faced for now too long. Mr. Speaker, I heard the Honorable Justice Kemei say that sugar is one of the most lucrative crops, sugarcane, in the world. And I agree with him, Mr. Speaker. And the question one would want to ask is how comes that it's only in Kenya where sugarcane growing has become a loss-making venture year in, year out. We know of countries, including our neighbors here, like Sudan, even Uganda, where sugarcane farming has remained as lucrative as you may want to take it. Mr. Speaker, so this is a good move. It's a good move, even though there are some gray areas that need to be ironed out. One of them is the matter of Mumias Sugar Factory. And my colleagues here agree with me fully. My colleagues from Western Kenya agree with me that unless and until you address the matter of Mumias Sugar Factory, which previously was accounting for about 60% of sugar production in the country, you will not have done justice to our farmers in Western Kenya. My own farmers from Ugunja sell their cane to Mumias Factory. And that's why I'm speaking from a position of authority. Mr. Speaker, we need to be told why Mumias is excluded from this program. Why? Is it because it's a private company? Even if it were, the public still has substantial shares in that factory. So I would suggest that even as we adopt this report, we go back and look into the matter of Mumias Sugar Factory. Secondly, I want to endorse what was said by Honorable Karoli Omondi. For the first time, I want to agree with him. We differ substantially, on other issues out there. But on this one, I agree with him. You cannot gloss over the matter of Miwani Sugar Factory land, over 10,000 acres, that has been grabbed by well-known persons. As you talk about writing off debts, what are you talking about? How do you rescue Miwani without taking back the land that has been grabbed by well-known persons? We want to see heads rolling, Mr. Speaker. There they were told that people must withdraw court cases to allow the sector to move. Mambo masiu mangapi? I don't know. What I know is that the same force that was used to force those litigants to withdraw their cases should have been used to force these masqueraders in Miwani to withdraw those cases so that the land can revert back to the public. Yes. Yes, what is good for the goose, Mr. Speaker, I heard you say is good for the gander. Yes. What is good for Mumias is good for Miwani, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Finally, as we go out looking for these strategic investors, let us ensure that we apply transparency. Transparency and accountability. We don't want this program to be a conduit for bringing in people who are already being identified, even as we debate here. I'm aware that there are people already angling around the country. Some are in the airport, some are all over here, waiting for this motion to go through so that they can lay claim on Mumias, Miwani, Muhoroni, Soni. Mr. Speaker, we shall be very vigilant. And if you dare step on our factories with a view to grabbing them, we shall deal with you. Thank you. I support. Yeah.
Maklab.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I like the fashion of the people of the sugar growing area. Mr. Speaker, I am a pastoralist and I witnessed presentations from Kenyans who are growing sugar. Mr. Speaker, it is so disparate that I believed that there was now what has been going on in the sugar industry, Mr. Speaker, has been actually banditry of the sugar industry. It is true that the objective of the National Treasury and this government, Mr. Speaker, is to make sugar growing a profitable venture for the people of Kenya. It is meant, this report, Mr. Speaker, is meant to bring people from out of poverty. And Mr. Speaker, the 5 sugar factories owned by government, Mr. Speaker, has continued to make a lot of losses for quite a lot of time. And I want members to listen on the background of this because it was a presentation. We asked why is it that there are arrears of people who supplied sugar to the factories, and yet the sugar has been milled and sold, and the farmers are not getting the money. The Speaker was shocked by the answers. The Speaker was shocked by the answers because the farmers have brought the sugar has been sold, and the farmers do not have their money. And the answer we were given was shocking, Mr. Speaker, that the people who are living in the growing sugar areas must know that the 5 sugar factories has been captured, and they go and look for brokers and cartels to bring money in advance to the factory in the name of helping them pay their problems, and then they sell the sugar to them at a cheap price. So when they sell the sugar at a cheap price, they are unable to pay the farmers who brought the sugar. That is how the farmers in this Western Kenya have actually suffered for a long time because of capture of the state-owned factories. Mr. Speaker, this committee, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank them because, Mr. Speaker, even when Treasury gave us penalties, arrears, principal interest of 50 billion, when we called upon KRA to bring their data, Mr. Speaker, the tax collector of Kenya, KRA, brought a figure of 16 billion. Mr. Speaker, the committee led by my vice chair, my vice chairman, Mr. Kimari Kuria and Dr. Kitonga, actually, we actually overruled and removed 50 billion that the National Treasury had brought forward as a writing off. The real figure, we used the tax collector, the KRA of 16 billion. You can imagine the difference, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, this is why we realized that, again, there was no safety net of employees of the sugar factories, Mr. Speaker. And we propose, therefore, that in the write-off is to pay the employees so that whoever is going to lease this land, Mr. Speaker, will start from a clean slate, will not be unorganized, will be able to run a clean business that will be able to bring money to the farmers. Mr. Speaker, the end product is the Wanjiku, the people in the lower cadre should actually benefit from the sugar growing area, Mr. Speaker. They should be able to make money out of this particular business, Mr. Speaker. And to ensure that the land is not lost, we brought this lease program, Mr. Speaker. We say the lease program needs to be understood by the farmers in those areas, Mr. Speaker, so that the land will actually be referred to the people living in those particular areas after the expiry of the lease, Mr. Speaker, which is a good thing other than privatization, Mr. Speaker, because the whole thing they have taken the land. Mr. Speaker, the last thing that I want, and I want a minute, Mr. Speaker, is actually there is need for research for growing of sugar. I realized most of the sugar in those areas, Mr. Speaker, I went around, are more like napier grass.
Onyango Koyo.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I stand here as the biggest beneficiary of this reform. That
Try and now take 2 minutes each so that this interest
the report that was here will be best cured by the intended or the impending sugar bill that has been tabled by Honorable Wanangwe. I want to talk about the case of Miwani Sugar Company because that is my ancestral land. Honorable Speaker, as Honorable Karoli said here, Miwani Sugar Company was the oldest company, and the land in which the raw materials grown were donated by the locals whom I represent in Parliament. Sometimes in 2008, somebody purportedly bought this land in an auction, and serious investigation was mounted as and when PLO Lumumba was the head of EACC. It came out from the report that there was never an auction, there was never lands bought, there was never money paid. Up to now, you cannot be shown that so many millions were paid from this point to this point in a bank or via this check. But we continue to hear that the land is being transferred to the hands of some locals. I am pleading that now in law, you are a serious lawyer, Honorable Speaker, there's a word called precedent. Now that as President has been said, in dealing with the case of Mumias, I suggest that if the same bill, the government should move and deal with the case of Miwani faster than Mumias, because this one is stark fraudulence. There's no proof that land was bought, and this case had been handled up to the court of appeal by Justice Mwera, when just court of appeal was the apex court. We are wondering how an environmental land court came here to review and reverse what the court of appeal gave, the judgment that it gave in 2008. We are appealing that the best way to cure this ill is for the government to use the same style that was done with Mumias. On behalf of my constituents, I appeal that be done immediately, and that I appeal with my members, colleagues, that when this sugar bill is tabled here, when we are going for the third reading.
Emmanuel Wangwe.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support this report by the committee, the joint committees. And Honorable Speaker, mine will be that the National Treasury need to be aware that even themselves, they are the originators of corruption. And Honorable Speaker, how does it happen? I want to thank the committee, Honorable Speaker, because it picked up an issue which was very fundamental. When you look at the wording of the report, the memorandum, Honorable Speaker, it talks of the mills being disposed of as a scrap within the provisions of the law on public procurement and disposal rules. Honorable Speaker, where on earth are you going to recommend already a scrap? National Treasury Speaker was inviting corruption in this case, and I would wish, Honorable Speaker, that the Joint Committee should have recommended proper reprimand of the Treasury officials. Honorable Speaker, I wish to thank the committee very vehemently that they have now made it available that we have resources, funds for the farmers, and also money is made available through this report to employees. Employees have suffered, and I want to thank the honorable member, especially the chair of finance and the chair of agriculture, that you have now thought it good that these employees can finally be paid, and farmers who took their time to invest into this model can now be paid their dues. Final, Honorable Speaker, I wish to appreciate the committee that the model of leasing is appreciated. The kind of leasing, Honorable Speaker, rather than the issue of privatization, is an issue which is welcome. However, Honorable Speaker, allow me to express my disappointment that Mumias is not in this report. However much we say that Mumias is private, Honorable Speaker, Miwani is 49% government and 51% private, Honorable Speaker. The CR12 indicates so. Why is it that Miwani Sugar can get its way into this report, Honorable Speaker, and Mumias, which has 20%?
Ndindi Nyoro.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I rise to support this memoranda from the National Treasury. Honorable Speaker, it is the right time that we think about reforming our sugar mills and the sugar sector generally, Honorable Speaker, because looking even at the data of our country, we need to do much more in terms of spurring production of sugar within the country. Number one, so that we look inwards in terms of our supply chains, but also, Mr. Speaker, it will go a long way into bridging the gap between our exports and imports. Mr. Speaker, any effort we put towards more production of sugar, like any other agricultural commodity, Honorable Speaker, we are in the other side of it doing import substitution. And generally, Mr. Speaker, this is very good for our economy. But holistically, the issue of having a lean government, Honorable Speaker, is an issue that we must keep on checking at the House. Honorable Speaker, I say so because the government must do the least in terms of the commercial sector, because the government should be doing what the government should be doing. that is enabling other industries, Honorable Speaker, and also checking on them, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, I am one of the ardent supporters of the fact that we need to reduce all the government-related, government-owned entities from the current, which is over 500, Honorable Speaker. We leave only that which the government should do. The government should be lean, because when we have a small government, we have big people, Honorable Speaker, figuratively speaking. We must go beyond sugar, what we are doing in terms of leasing. We must go into the commercial sector. There is no reason, for example, the government of Kenya should be owning a bank. And even in those banks the government owns, in a sector that is making supernormal profits, the government...
Peter Salasia.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, thank you. I have the following observation. Last time when we had the committee meeting as a finance and agriculture, we had a very interactive session with the stakeholders. And I can support 100. I want to thank the memorandum that came from the Treasury. And I can tell you that the leasing model, because you realize that most of these companies, like even the Mumias that is being talked here, what really made it to undergo the situation where it is right now is because of the poor privatization model that was used. So I stand to support 100% the model that we have used, because we have realized that this company, these state-owned factories, sugar factories, they cannot compete with the private sectors, because they don't have the capacity to have the new machine and also do diversification, value addition, and other factors that are encompassed in. I also want to thank the committee and for the MOCO, which has been so pertinent in contributing the production of cans. And I want to support the zoning for this matter, because there is no any way that you can allow somebody to travel miles and miles of kilometers just to travel to transport cans from there. There is also other extra cost that will also come in, and these things will also come back to the farmer. So I want to ask the members to support zoning, so that because of the little land that is available to us, the millers can focus there and develop cans, so that we can increase the productivity. Meanwhile, I want to thank the president for the maneno matatu is in the Bible, whereby they say that whoever does not respect the God and mfalme wa nchi, maneno ni matatu, amrishwe afanye nini. So those cases in Miwani, we're also asking the president.
Yes, David Ocheng.
Mr. Speaker.
Remember, I've curtailed your time to 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a very happy person this evening, because, Mr. Speaker, I believe this is the beginning of the rejuvenation of the sugar sector in this country, Mr. Speaker. This is the beginning of returning the sugar sector to the farmers themselves, who should be benefiting from the sugar farming in the country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, 3 things that are going to happen this evening that I applaud. One, Mr. Speaker, we are writing off debts worth more than 50 billion. Things that only happen to sugar, that only happen to tea and coffee. 50 billion off of farmers' loans. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, we are paying farmers arrears worth almost 7 billion. And 3, we are paying salary arrears to the companies, Zoya Sugar, South Yada Sugar, Miwani, Chemelil, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure that at the end of this evening, Mr. Speaker, our farmers will now know how they'll own their industries. Number 2, how long, and I believe that we should change this to make sure that it's 20 years, not 30. That is almost a lifetime, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to ask those who will be charged with running these sugar industries to do so with utmost good faith, trust, and ensure that farmers are able to benefit, so that our people can also be part of this country's economic rejuvenation. Thank you.
Naika. Member for Mumias West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am one of the happiest people today because Mumias Sugar factory stands in my constituency. We have really suffered. If you go to Mumias town, it is just a shell. Although the Treasury has not put a report of Mumias Sugar here, but we trust what the President said when he visited us, by removing the cartels who were in Mumias Sugar. And he promised us. And what I want to say, and I want my party leader one day to hear this, mambo ni matatu. That one you have to support us in Western. Don't meander around things. We have been suffering. Mambo ni mangapi? Mambo ni mangapi? Either aende heaven, aende jela, ama rudi kwa, lakini Mumias iwe nini? Revived. Hiyo ndio kitu mimi nataka kuongea hapa, Mr. Speaker, and we are one of the happiest. But this bill, this report, ingizwe Mumias Sugar na dates ziwe written off.
There is a point of order from
Speaker,
your leader.
I want to interrupt my good friend, the Honorable Naika, and my good neighbor for that matter. I heard him calling for my attention that I should listen carefully.
Yes.
And yet I haven't heard what was meant to be directed to me to act upon.
Now
I don't know. So
order.
I don't
Honorable Wandai, you are just being cheeky. You had him. Go on.
Yes.
You had him loud and clear.
He's supporting us halfway. This is what we don't want. That is the difference between us, Nyanza and Western. We are telling them openly. Hatutaki kuficha hii mambo. Mumias Sugar must be revived. We have suffered enough. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Kandui. Okay, I'll give you. Member for Kandui.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the...
You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for the opportunity. 3 things. I support wholeheartedly the government's efforts to write off the debts. And I just pray that this time round, let us have a clear balance sheet, because these debts were written off in 2012, but they have still been appearing in the books. I wholeheartedly support the payment of farmers and employees of Nzoia Sugar, people who have failed to send their children to school because of non-payment. We cannot have a sector that is not controlled, Honorable Speaker. I therefore support the establishment of the 5 catchment areas and for the development of regulations to guide the conduct of the sugar sector. We are having chaos in the sugar sector because of poaching, absence of regulations. And equally, I support the funds to be put towards supporting the Kenya Sugar Research Institute to be enable us to be able to develop new early maturing canes to be able to pay our farmers. But in respect to leasing, Honorable Speaker, I want to be very, very clear that this leasing must be done above board. I have looked at the recommendation. I'm saying the leasing is going to be done for 30 years. 30 years is too long a period of time. 2, I have looked at the recommendation, the nucleus and the land that are it is being recommended that the lands go back to their original owners. I don't think we need to return back to the original one because people were displaced. These lands were taken over by government. So we need to develop a system where farmers consistently begin taking over this particular industry so that they can be able to run it. Any recommendation that is pro-farmer to empower the farmer to run this particular industry is ultimately welcome. But we must do away with the sugar barons and the sugar economic bandits who have brought the confusion in this particular sector by importing sugar and doing cane poaching. As Honorable Naika says, mambo ni matatu. We must bring this sector to its senses. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Because I'll give you. Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to support this report, memorandum by the National Treasury and Economic Planning on action plans to revive and commercialize state-owned sugar companies. Honorable Speaker, for a long time, state-owned sugar companies have actually been mismanaged. They've suffered from looting and corruption. And I think the position the President has taken is, is supported by everybody on this House, including my friend Opiyo Ndai and his team. And I think this is the way to go as a country, that when something is good and is being done that is helping Kenyans, all of us must appreciate it and must give it our full support. And not just this one alone, but many other programs
which we've seen the president put in place to make this country go in the right direction. We've seen the production efforts being put in the production, especially bringing down the cost of living. And I think, to me, that is something that is laudable and is something that is in the right direction. And I think our country now is taking the right trajectory, and we should be able to support. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support the memorandum.
Thank you, Honorable Fukose. Nabi Nabwera. Give Honorable Nabi the mic. You are giving the wrong location. There's one next to you there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You have 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the report. Mr. Speaker, this report goes a long way in reviving the sugar industry. However, Mr. Speaker, the issue about Miwani must be captured in its right context. I was the Joint Secretary of the Sugar Task Force, and we clearly found out that the land is government land. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I want to support this report with a recommendation that the debt of Mumias, that 3,654,593, be included in this report. And my reasoning, Mr. Speaker, is that Mumias is a national interest, is a public interest. Just like the government bailed out KQ when it was a private company, we should use the same principle to bail out Mumias. Secondly, the government has a shareholding of 20%. It is an interest that the government can come on board and therefore save Mumias. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wamboka, have 2 minutes. Give him the mic.
Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I want to support the report, particularly that farmers who are owed money, farmers of Zoya Sugar Company, workers of Zoya Sugar Company who are owed money for the longest time are going to be paid. I also support the Mambo ni Matatu. It pains me, Honorable Speaker, when foreigners, thieves, barons take our companies as a battleground, Honorable Speaker. When people want to fight on the land, on the field of Mumias Sugar Company, Honorable Speaker, and it's as if the government cannot do anything, we cannot do anything, that's unacceptable. And on that note, the Rai, in fact, he should have faced one of the three, this Rai, so that for the survival of sugar industry, Akwe, let him be a lesson to anybody who will want to dare to joke with the sweat of the people, who will want to steal the money of the people, Honorable Speaker. They will stop it. So for that, I support this report. I support, Honorable Wangwe is interfering with me. I support this report, Honorable Speaker, so that the farmers of Zoya Sugar Company, for once again, they can smile. They can take their children to school. They can even have weddings. Their wives can deliver in a decent way, Honorable Speaker. I support this report. They have done a good thing. Thank you so much, Honorable Speaker.
Omongina.
Honorable Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm Cherusha Mongina, not your Mongina. From the onset, I support the report of this Treasury report simply because as we were growing as young people, we understood that Kenya was thriving on an economy which pegged on agriculture. And in school, we were told that agriculture is the backbone of the economy of Kenya. And indeed, the sugar industry was one of those economies which made Kenya, even where people were coming from outside the world to come and benchmark. Countries which have grown benchmarked from Kenya, and it was because of industries like the sugar industries. Now that the report has come and it is going to make sure that the debts which have been there for so long, that the people who had worked so hard, who were not being paid, are going to be paid. I support this report, and I'm one of those who are supporting the three major issues which the president talked about. And indeed, our president is going to fix this country if we go by what he has been proposing. So I want to support and say that the sugar is going to be revived, and most of our people are going to be rich because of the revival of the sugar industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
A minute each. Malulu Njendi, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I want to thank the President of this country for his goodwill towards cane farming. It's actually his initiative that we are where we are, and therefore I support this report fully, that debts have to be repaid by the government. However, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask Treasury of the government. We have the persons who have caused farmers to suffer. I'm aware of some persons who actually borrowed money from Mumias, over 200 million, 500 million, and these people are walking around in the country. Mr. Speaker, as we write off the debts, the persons who have stolen this money must be actually brought to book. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Kagombe, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support this report. And Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we found in these sugar areas is the issue of governance. When there is poor governance, the sugar industry will continue suffering. And I think that the privatization model that we've taken is not enough. These industries, these millers must revert to the farmers, actual farmers, like the tea farmers have taken over the tea factories, and guide them. And I would like to persuade Honorable Salasia here that the zoning that they want to introduce is going to kill the industry, because you're going to have a farmer who wants to take his cane to a certain factory and cannot get the proceeds, and they are going to suffer. Therefore, what we got from the people on the ground is that they want it to be liberalized so that we are able to fetch better markets and so that we kill this monopoly that has been happening. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Rangwe, Ndiwa, 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As they say in medicine, you have to stabilize a patient. Let's pay our farmers, pay our workers, so children can go to school. As we speak here, there's so many children who are not going to school. That's point number one. Number two, this leasing model, let us have a good legal framework. Otherwise, it can be abused and also can evoke emotion, the same emotion land brings, and we cannot succeed in that. The issue which also came from farmers, and I think is very important, members, is about the extension workers, which is missing in all this, and that is depressing the yields, the good sucrose. We talked about sucrose content, and lastly, the poaching. It's not about the zoning. Let's stop the poaching. There's a provision here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Rachel Nyamai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to also put my word in this very important report. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I would like to congratulate the two chairs. They have done a wonderful job, and you can tell that they put their time in this. Now that it is 1 minute, Honorable Speaker, let me be sharp and just go to the rhetorical question which I want to ask. Mr. Speaker, for how long have we known that we can plant sugarcane that can last 6 months and we harvest? And why is it that, Honorable Speaker, we have had governments that have been putting farmers in the agony of spending 36 months waiting to harvest sugar? Honorable Speaker, I would like to thank Kenya Kwanza government. I want to thank the President and to say that he is going to take this country very far, and agree with the other members that mambo ni matatu in the sugar sector. This is a sector that must be handled very quickly, very fast, because the people who are there are...
Nabulindo, you have a minute. Give Nabulindo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, first, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for giving me this chance. And I would like to say that I oppose this report. I'm opposing this report because when I look at the list of the companies listed, Mumias Sugar is not there. And as long as Mumias Sugar is not there, and I represent 100% farmers, sugarcane farmers, I will not support this report. So therefore, if later on they can introduce an amendment to include Mumias Sugar in all this engagement, then I'll support the report. But for now, I oppose it.
Member for Kitutu.
What?
Take your seat, Nabulindo. Give Kitutu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to support this report.
You have a minute.
I want to support this report on the sugar because in Nyanza region, sugar sector is our coffee, is our tea, and it's our gold. So this report, I want to support it fully because there are cartels who have been in this sector who have managed to make sure that our farmers are not paid well. And I want to support it because our farmers from now henceforth, they are going to get their dues and they are going to make sure that their kids go to school well and they get back their money. And to the cartels, as they say, mambo ni matatu. Either you go to heaven or you go to jail or you go somewhere else. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Makoha Odanga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I support this report.
You have a minute.
And it is good that government pulls out of businesses because we know government to be a very poor businessman. Mr. Speaker, lease model is being recommended, and we heard it from stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, even as we agree to the lease model, proper due diligence must be done because lease is quickly becoming the new model of land grabbing. And Mr. Speaker, Mumias Sugar Company, which is under receivership, should be included in this report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. This is the time we agreed. So I'll indulge the majority leader. Kimani, how much time do you need for reply? If you have 1 minute, then I'll give majority leader 5 minutes like your counterpart.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And I also join other members, except the Honorable Navulindo, who I had opposed this report
Give you a minute.
in supporting this report. But maybe if I may begin by informing the Honorable Navulindo, and I am sure there are also other members from Mumias, the larger Mumias area in Western Kenya, who are asking the question of Mumias Sugar Company. And indeed, they have a very good point in that Mumias also needs to be rescued. But he knows that Mumias is 20% owned by the public or by government and 80% private, by private investors. But I want to assure him that there are also measures to ensure that Mumias is also rescued from the abyss that has bedeviled the sugar sector. And that, Honorable Navulindo, will ensure that even the people of the greater Mumias area benefit from the sugar sector reforms to ensure that money gets back to the people's pockets in Mumias and other areas in the sugar belt. Honorable Speaker, part of the proposals in this memorandum by the National Treasury is the write-off of debts and taxes owed to GOK or to the government of Kenya, and penalties also owed to KRA by the sugar companies. And indeed, I want to support this measure that even as we seek to commercialize and privatize them, there is no private investor who will want to put their money in a company or a state entity that is bedeviled with a lot of liabilities, including tax liabilities, Honorable Speaker. And indeed, I support that measure to write off the debts that were owed to the government of Kenya, to make them more attractive to investors who bring in their private capital, private expertise, and make the sugar companies more efficient, and therefore end up guaranteeing farmers more money getting into their pockets. Honorable Speaker, I've also had concerns on the period of time, and I think it's the Honorable Makali who raised the issue of the period of 30 years. But Honorable Speaker, it's also good to appreciate that if you are to lease land and assets for a private investor to be able to have a bankable proposal, then the period of time of the lease should be a period of time when the investor will be able to recoup their investment, their capital investment, be able also to make a profit out of the investment. And therefore, I want to encourage even those who have that concern to appreciate that we are bringing in private capital. And even you as a private investor, you will not want to get into a lease agreement where you have 5 years. Even people who are leasing land today to develop petrol stations and all that, nobody is going for a lease for 5 years. You are looking for 20, 25 years. And therefore, I want to encourage those members who have that concern that indeed all those issues are issues that the National Treasury has looked into. Finally, Honorable Speaker, Mumias, Honorable Speaker, and I've heard even the Honorable Selassie has now considered that truly mambo ni matatu. That even the cartels that had taken over Mumia Sugar, Honorable Speaker, because they enjoyed the protection of state protection because of state capture, Honorable Speaker. We must today tell them loudly enough that that protection is gone and it shall never come back. And therefore, they must now socialize themselves to the Mambo ni Matatu gospel. And that they must get used to it. And that includes also their sponsors, Honorable Speaker. Because if they were facilitated through state capture, they had people who had access to political power who protected them, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, even as the Honorable Navulindo speaks about Mumias, and I know the Wanga people are very keen on Mumias because they surround that area of Mumias. And I know his party leader, because he's a member of the ODM, also owes Mumias Sugar Company close to above 300 million shillings. I want to ask the Honorable Navulindo to ask the party leader of ODM to now pay up the money he owes to Mumia Sugar Company, so that Mumia Sugar Company also benefits from this commercialization, Honorable Speaker.
Yes,
because we cannot have a situation where
majority. There's a point of order from Wandai.
Mr. Speaker, I think we are doing so well up to the point where Honorable Chungwa has started to digress in a very, very fundamental way. Mr. Speaker, it is not right, the outstanding orders, for the Honorable Chungwa to allege or to claim that the leader of ODM, and there's only one leader of ODM, there is only one leader of ODM, that the leader of ODM owes Mumias Sugar Company 300 billion shillings. Why would that be an allegation allowed to happen on the floor of this House? You all know. So can he table evidence that the leader of ODM owes Mumias Company that kind of money, or withdraw and apologize? Because otherwise that would be scandalizing in the name of somebody who cannot defend themselves on the floor of this House. Mr. Speaker, I plead with you.
Chungwa.
To the leader.
Honorable Speaker,
your time is up.
Honorable Speaker, you know, Honorable Speaker, I was saying, it is only right that if you are writing off debts owed to the public, owed by these sugar companies to KRA, and that is public money, even individuals and private companies that owe the sugar companies should and must pay up. Honorable Speaker, on the question of the leader of ODM, it is in public domain, including documents tabled in this House previously, including audit reports. that he, the leader of ODM, owes Mumias. Na mambo ni matatu, he has to pay. And either
Your time
pay
is up.
or pay.
Order. I'll indulge the Honorable Nyamita 1 minute from the Sony zone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this particular report. Mr. Speaker, I think this is the true and most relevant attempt at truly bringing the cost of living down. Because when you waive the debts and pay farmers and pay employees their money, then it means that money is going to go into circulation. Previous attempts to revive sectors, Mr. Speaker, we have only seen the tea, coffee, and other sectors, including Mira, getting this sort of treatment. That this time the sugar industry has been considered, this is a really great move. Mr. Speaker, in Sony Sugar, 860 million for farmers, about 1.1 billion for salaries arrears is going to be a big boost. All we want is that before the private sector takes the reins, we want that proper public participation.
Kimani, Chairman, Honorable Kimani.
Wewe, wikendi ni ya kazi.
Beba, wikendi ya kazi wewe, wikendi ya kazi.
Wikendi ya kazi.